By this time, Al was flying full-time with the Air Guard, and growing up as part of a military family had unique challenges.
He was at the base a lot. They were on what's called alert, and he had to stay overnight there. And you pulled your alerts, so many every month. I mean, it just seemed like, and being little kids, and we were to bed early, I always wanted to see more of him. Because when he did come home, the first thing we all did was jump on him, and he gave us horsey rides till I'm sure his knees were raw.
Sometimes it was a little scary when he arrived because it was, you wait till your father gets.
Well, that's when we got a little older. Then we didn't want him to come home.
He refers to himself as a stern commander. Of course, we have to set the stage. We have a military lieutenant colonel, Catholic, Italian, raised in Raleigh Street. He had expectations, and as long as you worked within the guidelines, there was always lots of love and respect. Downward too. I mean, I would always show respect to me as his son, as his boy, and hopefully, I would earn that respect.
As part of his old world upbringing, the concept of respect, for oneself as well as for others, had been ingrained in Al. To him, self-respect encompassed everything from behavior to personal appearance, and his fighter squadron reflected this.
Al ran a tight ship, very tight ship, from the perspective of a captain or lieutenant working for him. Before we'd go on a cross country, take an airplane and go around the country, you'd land at different bases, and he always wanted to make sure that if you were one from the Duluth Guard, you looked good.
We had the best looking bunch of fighter pilots in the country, I believe, and they were all emulating Al, and he insisted on that.
We had the sharpest looking squadron anywhere. Our uniforms had to be crisp, our shoes, shiny shoes.
He made us wear these damn yellow baseball caps, and when you started doing pre-flights under F-102, they got dirty. And if he found fingerprints on the bill of your cap or something, he'd chew your butt.
In spite of his self-characterization as a stern commander, Al was never short on panache or good humor. This was apparent every time he lowered his landing gear.
The crew chiefs painted white walls on the squadron commander has his own airplane with 4 stripes on it, and or 3 or 4, I can't remember. And they painted white wall tires on his with the old rubber white wall paint they used to have.
And he used to just take the biggest pride in that. He'd go off and go across country, and then he'd come back and he'd tell me, he says, "Boy," he said, "the tower, they seen that airplane coming in and want to know where I got the white sidewalls."
I found it very motivational to be around a commander that had all this color, talked a lot, put a little bit of humor in things. I know when he was briefing us, for example, Air Defense Command had a checklist you had to follow somewhat for briefing, and one of the items on it was that you had to cover is what you do when you get lost. And he'd just say, when you get lost, go right home. And then he'd laugh.
But to lead men in the air, where life and death often hang in the balance, charisma alone is not enough. Trust was the cement that formed an enduring bond between Al and his squadron. This was never more apparent than on the night pilot Felix Tomlinson, Al's wingman during the flameout incident, found himself descending into thick fog.
And I made an approach, and I got down to minimums, and I didn't see a thing, and I went around. And I called and said, "I'm minimum fuel. I can't go anywhere. I'll try one more time. If we don't make it, we're going to have to get out of this thing. We're going to have to punch out." Al came on, and he said, "Fee?" "Yeah." This is Al. He says, "I'm going out on mobile." He says, "I'll go out and park right under you, and you come across. If we look good, if I see you and you look okay, you willing to take my word?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay." So I went around, got back on ILS GCA, and I tell you, that was one approach that those crosshairs never moved. They were right on the bubble the whole way. I never saw anything. I went through minimums, got the blinker, and the which was at 100 feet. I kept coming down to 50 feet, and all of a sudden the boy said, You're dead on the middle. Cut the power. It was Albert. I cut the power. Hit the ground. I felt it hit, rounded out a little bit, and then I saw a runway marker and a center line light go by, and it's the first time. I was on the ground before I saw anything. I wouldn't do that with anybody else. I get a little choked up just thinking about it, but also there was a lot of risk on his part. He was sitting right in the middle on the end of the runway, and he was taking care of me.
Throughout the 1960s, Al and his family enjoyed an active lifestyle. It was the natural extension of the lively games and sports Al had played with enthusiasm while growing up on Raleigh Street. Even among the other fighter pilots, Al's competitive spirit was strong and often contagious.
Whether it was in an inspection, whether it was in playing ping pong in the alert barn or flying in the air, he was good. He wanted to set a strong example, and he didn't want to lose.
He liked to be able to get in there and compete. And he was very good at it because he knew how to get the people with him.
He would get you motivated and charged up and feeling the same as he did in terms of what you were trying to accomplish.
One application for the squadron's motivation was competing in flying and gunnery contests. In 1964, a team fielded by the 179th, now part of the 148th Fighter Group, won the Ricks Trophy, a prestigious competition based on scored intercepts. The commander of the 148th was Colonel Ralph Jerome.
This is a letter from the Vice Chief of the United States Air Force, General J.P. McDonnell, and this is a letter to me talking about the 148th Fighter Group and the winning of the Ricks Trophy race. But an important down here is, please convey to Major Albert J. Amatuzio and Captain John Arata my best wishes for continued success. I thought that was a great recognition for a great team that won the Ricks Trophy race for the 148th Fighter Group.
In 1970, piloting the F-102 fighter, Al set his group's sights on an even more ambitious target, the William Tell competition, also called the World Series of Weaponry.
William Tell was an annual competition where the different squadrons, not only did this mission in the United States, but even over in Europe, everywhere, would compete.
As one of only 3 F-102 Air National Guard units chosen to compete at William Tell, the 148th's arrival at the Florida venue was cause for celebration. Al made sure his team was focused on the real prize.
When we got down to William Tell, we did our arrival show, and of course there's quite a bit of socializing that goes on down there prior to the meet, and sometimes during and after. Except Al was, his goal was to win. And the Duluth unit didn't socialize. When everybody was at the club comparing war stories and practice missions, we were in his room with maps laid out on the floor with our controllers there and planning on how to best execute the attacks. So we never got into the celebrating until it was all over with.
Al's air crews, maintenance crews, and ground controllers demonstrated near-perfect teamwork intercepting and destroying the target drones. When the smoke finally settled, the 148th had swept the F-102 category. Their victory celebration was courtesy of Idaho's elite Air National Guard unit.
Boise had entered a team in the William Tell, and we bet Boise $1,000 that we were going to win.
We took that $1,000 check that these guys won, and we had the biggest party up here at the hangar when we got home that you ever saw.
I was a maintenance officer, and Al, he wasn't there too long before he began spending time in my office reading technical publications on lubrication, synthetic oil.
And he said, all the jets in the world use this oil. And I remember him saying that. Yeah. He said, well, wouldn't it be good in cars?
I think what got Al interested in synthetic lubricants is the knowledge that jet airplane he was flying was surviving and able to survive because synthetic lubricants were used in that engine to cool it and lubricate it. He understood and knew that a normal mineral oil would not survive that environment. So I think what he did is said, hey, the environment in this jet engine is very, very severe, but then again, the environment within the gasoline engine is not a whole lot less severe. I think there's advantages for synthetic lubricants to be used in the automobile engine.
Seeds of ambition sown years earlier, glimpsed in a young boy's contemplation of cars crossing a bridge, in the goal printed in a high school yearbook, and in lessons absorbed from an enterprising businesswoman, were about to bear fruit. After years of witnessing firsthand the advantages of synthetic lubricants in jet engines, Al Amatuzio's mind had fixed on a new goal. Why not in cars?
And that's when he got the whole idea to go into business with synthetic oil, his Amsoil company. And you know, at the time, people were poo-pooing it.
When he first came out with his synthetic oil, they said, Al, I think he's been at altitude too long without oxygen.
There was an officer down in St. Paul that I knew quite well, who was an insurance man, who called Ammo's oil moose milk. And he says, Ammo's going to go broke. Monkey with his moose milk.
In fact, Al's idea was based on established science. His concept was the application of a highly developed technology to a need as old as the internal combustion engine itself.
People use lubricants in their automobiles to protect their engine from wear and to provide slipperiness, if you will, so the engine can turn freely and maximize fuel economy, so on and so forth.
What you do is under dynamic loads, you build a thin film. It's a barrier. It's a barrier film, and as long as those metal surfaces are not rubbing against each other, you don't wear.
But a film of conventional petroleum motor oil, also known as mineral oil because the base fluid is refined from crude oil, is doomed to fail as the random molecules interact and break down. In contrast, the base fluid of a synthetic lubricant is engineered in a laboratory to have strong, uniform molecules.
And that is the simple concept of synthetics. The base fluids have much stronger films than a petroleum.
In addition, the chemical potpourri in mineral oil includes waxes that cause the oil to thicken at low temperatures, even into a solid. Again, synthetic oils are chemically uniform.
The advantages that the products have is they have extremely good fluidity at low temperatures. And that's something that a normal mineral oil just cannot achieve even with the heavy use of chemicals. So low temperature fluidity is the major advantage. High temperature thermal stability is the other advantage.
When you can put together a fluid that is very stable, right, especially at high temperatures, it has the opportunity to last longer. You don't need the same intensive use of antioxidants. The acid number doesn't rise as rapidly, and you don't break down, you don't get the tars, sludge, and varnish. Therefore, it lasts longer.
A synthetic motor oil would offer consumers a quantum leap in quality and performance. Benefits would include reduced friction and wear, particularly at extreme temperatures, and cost